Alrighty, so we are moving on to number 7, the charter school project, part 2. David, come on up.
Does this mean these are thousands?
I saw as we were having this conversation about more research and numbers and figures that you and Rick were just kind of trying to look off to the side.
We're taking notes.
We got to keep you guys hopping.
Okay. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
We are here to talk about charter school. We started, I call this our project, sometimes I call it our adventure. We started our little adventure on this topic back last July, and as you recall, we came last November where we talked about some of the funding and financial related topics with respect to charter schools. And what we wanted to do with this item today was to sort of go back to our core mission as a retirement system, which is to ensure the retirement security of teachers in California. So the main idea, we try to basically look how does the choice that charter schools have when it comes to retirement benefits, because they have the option of electing CalSTRS or not, how does that impact our mission, the retirement security of teachers? So the first thing we did, and there's a fair bit of information in the agenda item about the petition process, but it all starts at the petition process. Charter schools have to identify as part of their petition whether or not they will provide benefits through CalSTRS. And what we find out with this trying to do research is it's unclear that any thoughts or any information is available out there as to the benefits of providing CalSTRS. So one of the idea that we tossed around internally was, should we create a document that we could put on our website or make available that would highlight the benefits of CalSTRS? What became clear is, I think even if we were to do this, I think it will be very challenging to try to make this document known out there and to ensure it's used as part of the petition process. And one of the big hurdle, I think, in this area will be the fact that we generally don't find out about charter schools until well after they've been created, which is after the petition was drafted, the signatures were collected and approved by the chartering authority, at which point it's too late. So we could certainly go down that path, but it may be a path where we are not successful, but it's certainly something that we could try to do. So that was kind of the first area where we focused our research. Then after that, we said, okay, so once a charter school has made the decision not to participate in CalSTRS, what we felt was important when it comes to retirement security is, are teachers aware that they may not be covered by CalSTRS? So that's very important, because when you prepare for retirement, if you think you're going to be covered by CalSTRS and you're not, it may have some implications down the road. So one of the things I just want to highlight that we mentioned in the item that we thought was interesting is if you look at current statutes, if you're a charter school that has elected CalSTRS, you are required by law to disclose to your employee that you provide CalSTRS. But if you don't provide CalSTRS, there are no requirements for you to tell your employees that they're not covered by CalSTRS, which is kind of, you could view it as counterintuitive, but it's interesting that the only requirement today to disclose that your retirement benefit is if you provide CalSTRS. So that's, we've talked about it. Again, if there was a desire to make a change in this area, it would require some law changes, but we felt it's interesting when you look at retirement security and making sure the employees are aware. There are no requirements that they disclose that they don't provide CalSTRS. Now, you would think that just good HR practices, they should disclose to new employees what kind of retirement benefits they have. But our concern was that, when you're a teacher in California, I think most people, especially if you've worked for several schools, you may just assume that, oh, I'm still covered by CalSTRS and not ask the questions and not pay attention. So one of the things that we did internally is we tried to see, have we seen a lot of cases where members retire and we tell them that, hey, and they thought maybe they had 30 years of service, and we tell them, no, you only have 20 because you work at this charter school, not in CalSTRS. It appears to date we haven't seen this much. So it appears that probably is not an issue, which is good. So we'll continue to monitor this. But so that was with respect to the disclosure. The next aspect, again, do you have any questions?
Before you
Yes.
get to the next aspect, Harry?
Thanks for raising that to our attention, David, because I think it's something that you should continue to monitor. And our mission is to ensure the retirement security of California's educators and garner their trust. So if California's educators are not aware of the fact because they're not being informed, because the employer is not required to, one could logically argue that it's undermining the retirement security of those educators.
Correct.
So therefore, what could we do to, as you said, to date, it hasn't proven to be that significant, but on a forward-looking basis, it may, which could lead to something that's actionable by this board to sponsor legislation that would require the employer to provide that knowledge.
Correct. And we highlighted that in the item. An idea would be to, for example, and there could be other ideas, but one would be to simply require that something be signed by the employees when they're hired by the charter school, stating that they understand that they're not covered by CalSTRS. So the other aspect we looked at, so once an employee is not in CalSTRS and that service does not count toward CalSTRS benefit, we looked at service credit purchases because we wanted to highlight something, I don't want to say unique, but it was interesting, is under current rules that are set in statute today, there seemed to be a different application, or the ability to purchase service is different depending if you work for a charter school that was outside of California versus inside California. So if you work for a charter school that was outside California, so obviously you're not part of CalSTRS. If later on you become a CalSTRS member, today you can actually purchase that service. You have to pay the equivalent of both the employer and the member contributions in the state. You have to pay all the cost. But as a member, you're able to buy that service. So if you want to obtain more retirement security and you can afford it, you have the ability to buy it. But if you work for a charter school in California and later on become a CalSTRS member working for a traditional school, you cannot buy that service. So it's interesting because I look at it, if I lived in South Lake Tahoe and I take a job on the Nevada side and later become a CalSTRS member, I can buy that service. If you're in a charter school in South Lake Tahoe, not in CalSTRS, you cannot buy that service. So that's just the way that the rules are set in statute. So that could be another areas if we want to expand retirement security. It could be in other areas that could be discussed and analyzed. And this is something certainly that will have to be discussed with the larger education community, because I think this is an area where you have to be careful, because some people may view this as, is this going to give one more reason to charter school to not be in CalSTRS? Because they're going to say, you know what, later on, if you really want the CalSTRS benefit, you can just buy it on your own. So I think we're going to have to consider all of the, the pros and cons of this, but that's something we could certainly look at if the board wishes us to spend more time. So the other aspect I wanted to talk about is last November when we had a discussion. Yes, Dana? No, go ahead. I was going to switch topics slightly.
Thanks, Dana. David, on the issue of the purchase of service credit, I know you're putting that forth in terms of trying to level the playing field with respect to those who have been with out-of-state charters. Have you looked at it with respect to the impact on the financial stability of the fund, and then even how we would go about, I guess, estimating how many would even be eligible to purchase service?
I don't think we've tried to estimate how many, but anytime you allow someone to buy service, I guess initially it has no impact on the financial stability of the system, because technically the whole idea of the service purchase is for them to pay the entire liability associated with that service. But as your one thing that it does do anytime a service credit purchase is allowed is you do transfer the investment risk, if you want, to on the employer side. So it does, the initial impact, it's meant to be cost neutral to the system, but I think we all have to understand that when a member buys service, they're guaranteed a benefit out of it, and it's done based on a certain investment return assumption. To the extent that these assumptions are not met long-term, it does shift a little bit of the risk on both the state and the employer side.
I'm just thinking about consistency just with respect to larger policy where the Pepper restrictions now on purchasing service credit. So just, I mean, I think we might be leveling the playing field on one level, but at another level, having consistencies. Thank you.
So the other thing I wanted to point out from the item, if you recall in November, I think it was you, Sharon, that had some questions about when we were talking about some states have mandatory participation, other optionals. There was a question that was raised as to, is there a way to find out why some states went mandatory and some went optionals? We tried. We tried real hard. And I think what became clear is it's interesting because we called someone from a national organization, and when we asked him that question, he said, "You are assuming that the legislative process is a rational one." That's the comment we received. So anyway, it was very
When
hard.
you're talking about the national organization, what national organization are you talking about?
I think David's keeping it.
Okay. I'll talk to you offline.
Yes. So we tried, we looked at California, we looked at Louisiana and Colorado. It was very hard. We were not able to find any specific information that led to why exactly one went mandatory versus optional. But what was clear in all cases is when they created charter schools, it was done with, first and foremost, with wanting to maximize flexibility and minimize limitations imposed by the state. And the other thing that became clear is once a choice was made, it's very hard to change that choice. All three states, California, Louisiana, and Colorado, all saw legislative proposals to change the choice they currently provide. And in all cases, that legislative proposal failed. So that's pretty much, I think, if you're trying to get a takeaway from this, once you make a decision, it's extremely hard to change it.
Yeah, go ahead. Sharon?
Okay. So Louisiana is mandatory?
Yes, no, so Louisiana is optional like
Optional,
California.
and Colorado is
is mandatory. So Colorado, for the last few years, has had legislative proposals to make it optional. California, a few years ago, in 2012, there was a proposal to make it mandatory, and same thing in Louisiana as well.
So we did have a proposal.
Yeah, we mentioned it in the agenda item. I think it's AB 1812, if my memory serves
It was 2012, and it was the Amiano bill.
Okay.
So I had a question on that too, David.
Yeah, it's AB 1819 on page 66 of your item.
Because it didn't just talk about going into the defined benefit, it also talked about that the cash balance would be an option. And so I was hoping that somebody remembered,
Yeah, I think
explain
the main
I didn't
re-
understand what that was, why
I-
they'd have both choices.
I think it was to reflect the current kind of how it's done today for traditional schools. Traditional schools today are required to participate in the defined benefit, but have an option on the cash balance. So it was to mimic the same approach for the charter schools, mandate them into the defined benefit and option for cash balance.
And the option of the cash balance only went to part-time.
Yeah, that's right. And cash balance
Okay.
is only for part-time employees. Yes.
Okay.
So that's why it was drafted that way.
Okay, thank you.
In the item here, we mentioned the bill did not go, and the Department of Finance actually took an opposed position. And
Right.
if you read, we quote it on page 66, but I think what the Department of Finance said is that this bill would preempt local charter school decisions about compensation and benefits, which appears contrary to the policy intent of charter school flexibility. So that was the message from Department of Finance, which was, you can see that based on this, it appears that the administration, when charter school were created in California, they wanted to leave the decision about salary and benefits, including retirements, at the charter school level, that decision should be made in the petition. So,
Go ahead, Sharon.
Just to finish this line of thinking, so are you saying when you went out to try and answer my question, and I didn't expect necessarily that you would get a clean answer, but is it basically because of, it's just legislation and
legislation
politics
and also
every state
time,
is
the
different?
time that has passed. Like, for example, in California, that was in 1992. So many of the people that were involved at the time are no longer there. So that was, I think, a series of, so we got in touch with other states to try to find more, and it was as difficult as simply, we would have thought it would be easier to at least do it for California, but it was as difficult here as it was to try to find it for other states. So this is sort of all I wanted to highlight from the item. Again, like if you look at next steps, we have a lot of processes in the house already, like with respect to audits in Robin's area when it comes to try to monitor schools in financial distress, in Andrew's area with respect to training and outreach. We intend to continue to monitor the growth in charter schools. And I think each year when we report back to you in our funding risk item in November, I think we're going to try to include a charter school section just to monitor to see how many new ones do we see each year, how many elect CalSTRS, how many don't, so we can keep an eye on it. As we told you in November, we don't see this as an issue at the moment. It would take drastic increases in number for this to become an issue, but we're going to keep monitoring it. So basically, I'm going to put it back to you now, more to open up the discussion to see, based on what we presented in the items, is there anything you would like us to act on, to do further research, understanding that anything we take on, we're going to further analyze it, and we're going to have a thorough discussion with the entire education community and our stakeholders.
All right, Betty?
I just got an alert from the Sacramento Bee about a charter school here in Sacramento closing abruptly. That it was chartered by the Department of Education, and I guess I'm a little unclear about the authorities around charter schools. So they can be, the chartering entity can be a local school district?
Yeah,
as
so
well as the
we
department?
mentioned it in the item. So basically, when a petition is created, the first step is always to ask the district first to approve
right.
it. If the district does not approve it, then it goes to the county office of education.
Right.
If the county does not approve it, then the petitioners can continue to pursue it further, and ultimately it goes to the state. And to date, if you look at today, we have about 1,250 charter schools in California. About 1,050, 85% have been chartered and approved by the school district. About 13% by the county, so about 160 of them. And about just 25 or 30, about 2% of those have been approved by the state.
So if the state, and I'm sorry, I'm not putting Diane on the spot, but I'm just trying to figure this out. So if the state ends up being the chartering authority, does it come with all of the responsibilities about reporting as well, or does that still come back to the county office?
I believe, maybe I'll need some help on this, but I believe it's still at the county. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yes, I think the report,
The
I think the
reporting
only thing, like if you look
it's
at the Charter
reporting agency.
School Act, where it talks about who's responsible, like who's liable to be responsible, I think it generally falls to the chartering authority.
I know that one of the missions there are several missions of a charter school, and I've been trying to figure out what their real interest is. So they have interest in, flexibility of curriculum, among other things, parent participation, and a lot of other things. Are they really interested in retirement benefits for their members? I mean,
My personal opinion is I think when the petition process is created, this is probably the last thing that people worry about. Because I've seen it in a city we lived in before, the parents trying to push for a charter school. It's all about kids, it's all about education. How can we provide the best education to the children? I think retirement benefits is probably especially when you look at the parents, it's probably the last thing they worry about.
So if we want charter schools to become CalSTRS participants, how can we advertise? How can we, do the pep talk for them? I mean, what are some ideas that how do we do that?
That's why in the item, and I was telling my person, I think this is going to be a very, very, very challenging, I don't want to say impossible, but it could require an extensive amount of energy without much success out of it. So that's why this is probably one we may want to be. I still think it's a good idea maybe to contemplate creating a document highlighting the benefits of CalSTRS. But I think if we do so, I think we need to keep our expectations and hopes, I hate to say that, but fairly low as to the potential usage and the success of that document to result in a change in recent trends. I just think it will be,
Scary.
yes.
Thank you.
Steve?
Yeah, based on previous discussions I think the board has had about pursuing charter schools that are, go bankrupt or unsuccessful, would you agree that we probably need to be certain that we fully understand the processes involved with the participation of charter schools before we actively go out and solicit their participation in CalSTRS? That's my first question.
I'm trying to,
Steve, could you repeat your question, please?
Sure. And I'll give it the preface
Yes.
too, which was given some of the issues that have been raised, at least in discussions that I've participated in, with the, what happens when a charter school goes bankrupt, since that's a possibility that doesn't seem to exist for public schools. And our ability to make sure that in fact the payments relative to those that have chosen to participate in CalSTRS is addressed. Should we make sure that we're clear on all the mechanisms involved in recouping such payments before we go out and actively solicit the participation of charter schools?
on this front, myself, I think especially because if you look at the authority we have by statute today to technically recoup, to ask the controller to divert fund to us, I think it may be better to make sure that the chartering authority is aware that ultimately the responsibility may fall upon them if the charter school fails. And in the item, we mentioned a little something. I think as part of discussion that Robin Group has had with certain employers, one idea that was brought up is maybe someone should sponsor legislation to push for a requirement that, let's say, when a new charter school is created, maybe it'd be required to put a certain amount of money in some kind of escrow account. In case it ever were to go bankrupt, the county or the district may have, access to these funds to help pay any amount owed. But again, this is just an idea that was thrown out there. But I think ultimately, I think we just need to make sure that the district and the counties are aware that they may be financially liable if the charter school that they approve does not pay us.
Yeah, I just want to clarify a fine point in that the entity that CalSTRS is holding responsible for the reporting and the contributions is the County Office of Education or the report source, which typically is the County Office of Education. In some instances where we have a direct reporting relationship with significantly sized districts, that may not be the case, but primarily it's the County Office of Education, who may or may not be, and as David said, is likely not to be the chartering authority with the percentages that he described.
Well, let me rephrase the question then. As we enlist the interest of charter schools, would it be our responsibility to make sure that the county offices of education are aware of their potential liability should the charter school go under?
I think that may be worthwhile to explore this, yes.
One other question, because as I was reading through the materials the other night, I noticed that it said that they had the option of CalSTRS, CalPERS, Social Security. Are those mutually exclusive? I realize CalSTRS and CalPERS would be, but could a charter school choose to do both retirement and allow their or is that prevented, that you can't be in Social Security in a pension system at the same time?
No, you
if you're a
can't, but I
teacher?
think it depends. So in California, all teachers, if you're part of CalSTRS, you're automatically excluded from
Right.
Social Security.
I understand that.
But at CalPERS, most of the CalPERS school employees are also in Social Security.
Right.
It was a decision that was made way back.
But as it applies to charter schools, could they be in CalPERS and Social Security if they chose to?
Yes.
Okay, and then
CalPERS,
last
yes.
question, could they choose to do none of them? I couldn't tell whether, that you didn't.
You could, but Social Security has certain requirements that
Okay,
if
so
you're
you'd have
not
to be
with-
at least in Social Security.
No, Social Security has a requirement that if you don't, if for teachers, they could exclude themselves as long as they provide, for example, a 401k that's high enough. So the Social Security has
Okay.
threshold where to be excluded, you have to provide a minimum amount of retirement benefits.
So there'd have to be something.
Something,
for
correct.
some sort of security for a teacher entering into a charter school situation.
Correct.
Okay, excellent, thank you.
Betty, can I jump on that real quick? Sure. So David, because I had that question also. We listed the three options. STRS, PERS, Social Security. So what I think I hear you saying, that is if the charter school provides a retirement vehicle for their staff that is equivalent to what they would get in one of those three systems, they can offer something totally different than the
Yes.
three.
Yes. Because they can also just offer a 401k, like the, with like an 8% match or 6% match.
Yeah, yeah,
All
yeah,
of
yeah.
those would meet the minimum requirements set by Social Security.
And they get to determine what that vehicle is.
Yes.
Thank you.
Would they still do?
Betty?
So I'm just trying to think what kind of direction we can give you, David, in terms of how to move forward. So we have this new financial assessment risk program that we could use to track what's happening with these schools. And I guess I'm wondering, do we need, to Steve's point, a mechanism even ahead of that? Because sometimes once we identify the kind of risks that the charter school may be experiencing, it may be too late with respect to really capturing the contributions to STRS.
So last November, we presented a series of improvements that
Yeah.
Robin's area was looking to implement. So many of them are being implemented.
Yes.
So maybe what we can do would be, I think, these may work well, and maybe what we can do is report back in a couple of months or next
Yeah,
year.
I mean,
But we are in the process of
Okay.
implementing, especially so we're trying to improve processes to be more proactive, to identify schools in financial distress. So we believe we are in the process of implementing several improvements that we
Okay.
think will be helpful.
Okay. I mean, when you, it's just so startling when you see the headlines. It's like,
Yes.
it's so abrupt. And so I don't know how effective the tool is in
Correct.
terms
Yeah,
of
I
really
know it's
finding
hard.
those that are distressed. And so, I mean, this Paramount Collegiate Academy,
Yeah.
I have no idea whether we had any thought that they were under any kind of distress, but shut down. And then the second thing is, I do think with respect to the CalSTRS obligation, and this is an issue that we've been hearing about with respect to one county office, but I think even setting aside a fund, which ultimately could be, I guess, out of reach if it were part of a bankruptcy. I mean, I would really like to see the protection of those obligations to where the county office just takes those dollars off the top before allocating the funds to the charter school and making the payment to CalSTRS. I mean, I think that's the most assurance that we can have, but that would obviously require legislation. I think I'm okay for now.
Nora?
Thank you. So once a charter decides, let's say they give somebody the three options, right? Or four options, and somebody signs up to CalSTRS, what happens then?
So again, just to clarify, so the school district does not provide individual choices. They make a decision that the same choice applies to their employees. So at the time of when the petition is written, when those that write the petitions have to disclose in it if they will be part of CalSTRS, CalPERS, or Social Security, or they may say we're going to provide a 401k plan. So
let's
once
say they
that's,
do-
yeah, go ahead.
So let's say they do pick CalSTRS,
CalSTRS.
what happens?
Then once they hire teachers, then they are like any other school districts. They report them to CalSTRS. They have to pay the contribution rates that you set and so forth. And the teachers start to accrue service. But generally, a charter school is created, or the petition is adopted. It's adopted by the chartering authority, and it could be a couple months later or a year later, they hire their first teachers, and then then the county office of education would report them to us. So what we do internally is we try to keep track of all of the new charter schools in California to find out if they elected CalSTRS or not, and when we know they elected CalSTRS, we make sure that they report contributions, that they report payroll, so we monitor them.
I think my question is so that if we know what those charter schools are, and there seems to be these charter schools that have been defaulting, if there's a way for us to have these mechanisms and these triggers that allow us to know when it's headed in that direction, so that we can also be good advocates for our teachers who are members so that they understand what it is and how do we get them the information that they need to know? So let's say they can no longer pay into it or whatever it is that they know what the risks are because of the entity that they're a part of. And I don't know.
Well, the only thing I was going to add was that there is a gap between the time that the charter is approved and we actually see the contribution reporting. And so it is not necessarily true that the charter is approved and we see the school on the horizon, and then immediately thereafter, we get reporting and contributions. So it is a process of monitoring through that kind of unknown period, because enrollment can build over time, and the reporting processes and getting the payroll set up is also a transitional event. So I just wanted to assure you there are mechanisms to monitor that. But as Betty alluded to, you know, in this individual case, contributions are current. So from that perspective, we can see that they have been making payments.
Anything else, Nora? Okay. Jacqueline?
I just had a question. In the materials that you gave to us, it says that historically 90% of charter schools have elected CalSTRS. Is that still hold true? Have we seen any trends? Because if we have, I think we have roughly almost 1,300 charter schools in the state of California. So, I mean, are we seeing that roughly between maybe like 1,150 or 1,200 are in CalSTRS now?
Yes, but I think the concern that was raised last June is when we presented an item to the board that showed if you look at just the new charter schools the last 3-4 years,
trend.
the proportion has been greater and greater lately. So I think so the recent trend has been for, if you look at brand new charter schools, I think in the most recent year we looked at, about a third of them decided not to elect CalSTRS.
Got it.
We have
Okay.
assumed this is directly related to the increase in the contribution rates, edging toward 19.1%. It's a very different financial equation for a new charter school than it was before we passed the funding plan in 2014. So the data clearly is showing the impact of that funding plan and the choices a charter school would make. That's
helpful. I was trying to understand the idea of going after
Yeah.
charter schools when it seemed like we had most of them.
when the rates were 8.25%, you're barely paying more than a Social Security contribution of 6.25. Now you're paying it'll eventually end up at 19.1%. That's a big difference in Social Security. Yeah.
Thank you.
And it's a number that has changed quite a bit over time. And I can point to you later in November when we presented the information. I think if you look back to 15 years ago, there was a point in time where 30% of the charter schools were not in CalSTRS. And then we went through a period where most of the new ones were all elected CalSTRS. And then lately, the trend has reverted back to some of the earlier trends we saw like 20 years ago.
Paul?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Jacqueline, for asking that question, because that's what I wanted to kind of raise is, I think we're talking about two very separate questions here. One question has to do with if we have a charter school who is participating in CalSTRS, given that a charter school can declare bankruptcy but a public school cannot, what do we need to do to protect ourselves so that the contributions that are due to us are always going to come to us? That's one question. A very separate question is, I think, what this item is about, which is, what do we do about the fact that charter schools are not participating in CalSTRS, and is there something we should do about it? We know that CalSTRS provides a good benefit, but is there something we can do about it, especially in the context of the numbers that Jack just reminded us of? And so I think that those are two very different questions. The first one is one that may require a legislative solution, legislative attention to say, let's figure out how to protect ourselves and the teachers who teach in charter schools that participate in CalSTRS to make sure the contributions come to us, even if a school suddenly does, closes shop. But that's a different question than what David's report deals with, which is, should we be doing something to try to figure out how to attract schools to charter schools to participate in CalSTRS? And I think we've got, a real challenge just based on the numbers.
Well, even if it wasn't such a big number, I think a new entity, a new employer would have some legitimate questioning, paying an unfunded obligation from
That's why the number is so much higher than if they were just to participate in Social Security. I mean, that's exactly right.
It's a very raw argument.
It's a really tough one to make.
Yep.
Jacqueline?
Thanks. Thanks, Paul. I think that makes sense, kind of splitting those two issues. I have a question, and I don't know if there is an opportunity maybe to talk about it at a future meeting or to get a report back from staff on, when we're talking about charter schools going bankrupt, is it the school that can go bankrupt, or is it some sort of parent corporation or management organization, or who is going under, and is there a way to sort of split out what's owed to CalSTRS sort of in their public funding streams that were going directly to the school versus the entity that's declaring, in some cases, a different entity declaring bankruptcy and then shuttering the schools that were sort of under them? I'm just trying to think about ways that we can potentially ensure that public funds are being spent appropriately and we're not necessarily subject to bankruptcy court and those sorts of things.
Yeah, I think technically it could be, because if you look at charter schools, there are some that are just standalone, and there are some that are part of huge, either for nonprofit or profit organizations that are one of many charter schools. I guess it is possible that one of those large ones may go bankrupt, which could have an even bigger impact, because it could, easily impact multiple schools that are with us.
Okay.
I don't want to speak on the legal front, but I can say that from what I've observed in the appropriation patterns, the appropriations are going to the school.
Right.
So
that's my point. And so, but
Yeah.
it is that same school entity that potentially is declaring bankruptcy, is
well,
what I'm trying
again,
to get.
I hear you. Again, I think maybe that's something.
Just
the
something to
legal
look in,
team-
just sort of moving forward. We don't need to.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
It just depends on the school. Some
Okay.
schools are independently run where the school itself
Okay.
is the one who's fiscally responsible, and in other situations, there's a parent corporation.
Thank you.
And Sharon?
So David, I do wonder if moving forward, it'd be helpful for us to disaggregate these two, because I had the same observation Paul did, which I think both questions are important in terms of the bankruptcy piece and sort of how do we recoup and ensure, who's supposed to pay and does that on time. But I think the genesis of this conversation really was centered around our fiduciary duty and ensuring that we look at trends, we look at the future and say, okay, what's happening in the state of California with education, and what's the impact on money coming in and money going out? And so that, for me, as we started the conversation, so it might help us, because I do think the issues being brought up about bankruptcy is important, so maybe we can figure out how to disaggregate.
And I think and maybe I should have been more clear at the beginning. This is sort of, because, this is if you want, part 2 of our charter school item. Because so basically, if there are any actions you want to take, even related back to November, which is what Paul brought, the kind of financial issue, we are ready to take any direction from you that you have.
Well, I
on
think
this as well.
Jacqueline's request is really helpful, so that could be an item more focused on, I don't know what you call it, but, recouping or financial piece. I do wonder, I did just kind of look at LAUSD because I live in Los Angeles, and I'm going to send it to you. I can't get your email right now, but I'll send it to you. I sent it to Harry and Jack, that enrollment trends in LAUSD, and Harry referred to it earlier, back in 2005, we're about 700K in LAUSD, and now they're at about 500K. So a little over 10 years, 200K students in terms of enrollment going down. So I read stuff a lot. And so I read things like that, and especially LAUSD just being, a large school district. Those are the trends as a fiduciary I look at and go, those potentially have implications for our fund, because if charters are not opting into CalSTRS, then that's less money going in the long run. So I think it helps me to kind of make sure, at least in this lens, that we're looking at it that way, because that's, to me, what our concern is about this issue is really about the financial health of our system moving forward and making sure that we're always having our eyes open to trends and issues. And I certainly think the more we can do to educate, everyone about the benefit of, the secure retirement of California's teachers, charter school teachers that don't have the option to opt into CalSTRS. I know it's not my fiduciary duty because they're not CalSTRS members, but I certainly have a certain moral obligation to any teacher, educator in California. I want them to retire and have some kind of secure retirement. So, but for the purposes of our job here, I think it really is about looking at trends. So I'm look forward to, I know you guys are going to keep watching this for us and letting us know about things that we should be paying attention
Yes, so you can expect an update on this next November.
So David, I have a couple items. First of all, I'll go back to Jack's comments. Well, maybe I'll hold that till the end. If we're concerned that we've had members that are working in a school that is participating in CalSTRS now, or if we had members that then went to a charter that wasn't, how do we capture that population so they have an understanding that if they're in a charter, they might not be earning service credit for that? So I'm going to toss this out to Andrew. So Andrew, couldn't we put something in the progress report? Just like a little warning. I think we did that with Social Security offsets at one time. So, I mean, that's an idea that I have, just to capture the population that might be fluctuating between a traditional public school and a charter that might not be participating in CalSTRS.
So on this, I'm just going to jump in a little
Sure.
to help Andrew, because this might be a very difficult task, because what happens is if a teacher is with us and they go work for a charter school that's not in CalSTRS, to us, they will look exactly the same as if they had simply decided to move out of state to go work. So we can look to see how we can identify them, but it may be a difficult task too.
If we're just putting a three-sentence blurb
Yes.
in the progress report, anybody that's a member, whether they're active or not, is getting a progress report, as long as they're not retired. So, I mean, I think that's a very inexpensive, just kind of a heads up.
Correct.
And that's all I was talking about.
Correct, good. I think that's easy.
Just kind of the heads up part of it, because I think actually finding those people and having a larger conversation about it would be very difficult. And I know we're talking about large numbers, or we're talking about a number that's large enough that we think it would be difficult. But if we take a look at how charters are created, there's three ways. And there's two ways to start up a charter, and then there's one for conversion. So if you're talking about a conversion, you're talking about a traditional public school that's going to be converted, and the only way they can do that is if at least 50% of the permanent status teachers at that school sign on. They're already members of CalSTRS. We probably don't have to worry about that, other than knowing that quite often when somebody asks us to sign a petition, we don't necessarily read all the paperwork that's behind the signature page, so they might miss it. But that should be a group that's pretty aware of that they have a benefit in CalSTRS.
Correct.
They should be. I'm not saying that they are, but they should be.
And historically, conversions have all elected CalSTRS.
Right.
And we are seeing very few conversions now compared to years ago. Now it tends to be mostly brand-new startup charter
Yeah,
schools.
exactly. And then the two ways to do a startup is that one way is the number of teachers is equivalent to at least 1/2 of the number of the teachers that the charter estimates is going to be employed. I think if you're talking about something that's very small, could be likely that they're going to hire someone that has not necessarily been a member of STRS. But if you're talking about a charter that has some size to it, knowing that the flow between traditional public schools and charters, there's a flow coming back and forth. How many teachers get RIFed during a particular year, they don't get rehired, they go work for a charter until they can come back, that kind of thing. So I'm thinking that number also drops. So I think the one that we really have to be concerned about is when that petition and the charter is developed by someone that's outside the school system. And so my question to you, David, is have we taken a look at when these charters were created, or as charters get created? It sounds like you know how they're being
So the only thing
created,
we
because we know that there's not very many conversions anymore.
Yeah.
So is the massive amount, is the higher percentage of those startups done by parents or outside organizations, organizing parents?
That's the part we don't know. So we rely a lot on information from CDE, the California Department of Education, and all we can get from them at this time is, and maybe we can look to see if we can get finer details, but right now, all we can get is it a startup or is it a conversion?
Okay.
We haven't been able to see what kind of startup it is. Was the petition signed by teachers or by parents? Or so we can look. I think it's something we can certainly look to see if we can break it down in finer detail.
As that trend line, as we start to pay attention to the trend line, if we really truly become very concerned about it, I think
we can look at that.
That's a statistic that we might want to have, because that'll determine the numbers that we really have to work with. Instead of all charters, it might be a smaller number than what we think. Alrighty, and then going back to Jack's comments about new charters not necessarily wanting to have the responsibility for the unfunded liability. I totally get how a charter operator would do or feel about that way, but the people they're hiring, they're going to care. So that's a little bit different. Alrighty, thanks. Alrighty, anybody else? David, do you have anything else for us?
No, I think I was trying to get the full clarification as to the steps forward. I believe I got it all.
Okay.
Because you said you're going to come back in November.
We
right?
will. So mostly what we're going to do is mostly, from what I've heard, is mostly going to be monitoring of schools, and we're going to keep doing what we're doing currently, and we're going to report back to you in November.
That sounds great. Hi, Ed.
Hi, Ed Folia, CTA, and he retired. I have a question. When a person applies to a charter school as a teacher, is the employer obligated to tell them what their retirement system is, what retirement plan they will be under?
Only if they provide, so the law only requires them to say so if they are with CalSTRS. So if they provide CalSTRS, they are required to tell their new employee that they are covered by CalSTRS. If they're not covered by CalSTRS, they're not required to say anything.
Yeah, okay. My concern is this. Doesn't matter whether they're with CalSTRS or if a professional is going to want to teach here in the state of California, the employer should be obligated to say what retirement system you're going to be at the time they are going to sign a contract. Because I think that's the gatekeeper that we have, is if the teacher is understanding what their retirement system is, then I think they will either sign up, and if they don't sign up, I'm sorry, gee.
I thought we were back in the November.
I have to go back and say everything else. No, I think what the gatekeeper is the person that's applying. If they find that they can't hire teachers because they don't have CalSTRS, they might change their plan. So I don't know if that takes legislation or what it takes, but I think that's where we need to look at to find how we have control so the teacher knows what they're getting into when they sign that contract.
Alrighty. So I think, okay, is my mic on? I think I gave you all my mic power, Ed. I do have several people that have asked to speak after this item, so if you can make your way to a microphone, please. I have Jeff Potter, Dan Bellino, and Karen Monroe from the Alameda County Office of Ed, and then Yvonne Carrillo. I hope I pronounced that. Yvonne? From AXA, all righty. Thank you. And you don't all have to stand at the same mic. We have two, it's whatever you guys want to do. All righty. Jeff? Welcome to CalSTRS.
Good afternoon, thank you. Board Chair, esteemed board members, again, my name is Jeff Potter. I'm here to speak on this very topic. I am the Chief Business Officer at the Alameda County Office of Education. And I'm here to share some thoughts this afternoon on a recent action by CalSTRS that has adversely affected our organization and is both a cause for concern and also perhaps an opportunity for our two agencies and maybe county offices statewide to seek improvements to current CalSTRS reporting requirements. As you may know, last June, two charter schools in Alameda County, the Livermore Valley Charter School and Livermore Valley Charter Prep, ceased operations. The authorizer for these charter schools was the Livermore Valley Joint Unified School District. The charter's managing entity, known as the Tri-Valley Learning Corporation, filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy in June. Numerous investigations are currently underway, including with the Alameda County District Attorney's Office. Among the debts left unpaid by the charter was the June CalSTRS obligation of approximately $50,000. Our office requested that CalSTRS file a claim with the bankruptcy trustee in the same manner as the other creditors. To our knowledge, CalSTRS has elected not to do so. CalSTRS instead chose to hold the direct reporting agency responsible for the debt. We are that agency. To that end, CalSTRS instructed the State Controller's Office to withhold both the estimated June CalSTRS obligation for the charter as well as estimated penalties and interest from our January monthly state apportionment, and that action has now occurred. We requested access to an appellate process with CalSTRS to dispute this action. However, none was offered to us, and apparently none exists. The Ed Code CalSTRS is using to support this action is Section 23007. We believe this section is inapplicable in this situation, and there is no precedent for this action. And while we appreciate the interests of CalSTRS in protecting the pension obligations, we are strongly opposed to CalSTRS holding an innocent party responsible for the debts of a defunct corporation. And we object to using a mechanism within the Ed Code unintended for this purpose to withhold funding needed to support the staff and students of Alameda County. While we don't know the ultimate outcome of this recent action, we are certain it does not represent an appropriate or permanent solution to the issue of charter schools that cease operations, leaving behind staff and students, school districts, county offices, and countless creditors to contend with the fallout of the closure. We hope to continue this conversation in the coming months, and we look forward to working with you collaboratively in doing so. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Dan?
Good afternoon, Board. Dan Bellino, Chief of Staff at the Alameda County Office of Education, and I would like to cede the remainder of my time to Superintendent Monroe.
Good afternoon, Chair Dillon, Controller Yee, CalSTRS board members. I'm Karen Monroe. I'm Alameda County Superintendent of Schools, and I'm grateful to have the opportunity to address you today. I appreciate that the CalSTRS board is closely examining the financial risks posed by current charter school law. As you are aware, we've been working together to resolve the CalSTRS liability due to the bankruptcy of a charter in our county. We made this trip today not to address you as an adversary, but as a partner. All of us have responded to the call of public education. We want the best for the children who sit in California's classrooms and for the teachers who stand in front of them to deliver a rigorous education every day. I want to underscore our common goal, the long-term sustainability of the CalSTRS pension fund. As our interests are aligned, we have an obligation to work together to tackle the difficult issue before us. We all have an important stake in fiscal solvency and the fiscal solvency of CalSTRS, and in assuring our amazing California teachers receive the benefits they have earned. With this in mind, I'm deeply concerned about the prospect of charter schools in fiscal peril, terminating their CalSTRS relationship or claiming bankruptcy, then shifting their liabilities to school districts or county offices of education. We all want to see the system fully funded, and there's no question that the current policy creates systemic risk. First, allowing charters to cost shift their CalSTRS obligations to public agencies with the same mission creates perverse incentives to take away resources from classrooms and students. Second, the current policy makes it difficult for CalSTRS to collect contributions from delinquent charter schools. And finally, this could also have an impact on charter school authorizing by creating new concerns about the risks of authorization and the possibility of being held financially responsible for this type of liability. To ensure the long-term financial stability of the fund and to ensure its members receive the benefits they have earned, we need a strategy for collecting delinquent contributions that hold the right parties responsible. ACOE finds itself in a difficult position. Our agency and, by extension, our students are being held financially responsible for the circumstances that are not of our making. ACOE is not at fault for the outstanding contribution that is owed CalSTRS by the Tri-Valley Learning Corporation. Yet, we have been penalized financially for their mismanagement during a time when every dollar of funding is so critically important. This is not an easy pill to swallow. The loss of this funding impacts our ability to serve some of the most vulnerable students in Alameda County. For example, the $53,000 at issue pays the salary of an instructional assistant in our parenting teen program. So for us, this is not merely a transfer of funds between banks. We do not agree with the decision to withhold funding from our apportionment and continue to seek a more just outcome.
Karen, hang on just a second.
Yes.
Could we get that reset for 3 minutes, please? Another speaker's time was yielded, so we'll use both? Because you were the
That
next
was the
speaker.
idea.
You're
Thank
good.
you.
Keep on
Thank
going.
you.
Thank you.
And we also seek a permanent fix. I worry that this scenario establishes a precedent that affects not only our county, but others. Others across the state, and that this issue is the tip of an iceberg. We are concerned that the CalSTRS system will be stressed by more and bigger issues on the horizon that could have a devastating financial impact and put the sustainability of the system at further risk. In Alameda County, the amount owed is $53,000, but the larger charter entity in the next case could cause an unwitting education agency millions more. As stakeholders, these should be real and urgent concerns. We're willing to do more than just come to Sacramento to point out this problem. We're prepared to be a partner in the solution. I'm committed to working with CalSTRS as a partner to help mitigate these issues for the future and to reach beyond the interests of Alameda County to help generate remedies that positively affect all 58 California counties. Together, we must be forward-thinking and solutions-based, looking into possible systemic changes, some of which we know you have already begun to consider, including the establishment of escrow accounts for charter schools, the potential of requiring charters be bonded or insured to protect against these issues, or a potential change to Ed Code to make COE's reporting for charters optional. As a third-generation educator, I feel a personal and professional responsibility to ensure the promise of a pension for employees after their years of dedication and hard work on behalf of students. I want our system to be focused on the success of students, not battling over precious funding so critical to us all. It's incumbent upon us to work together to work this out. We owe it to our teachers and the taxpayers of our state. I respectfully, I'd request the board seek a just resolution to our situation and encourage staff to work with myself and other stakeholders to explore a future policy that protects the sustainability of the fund and protects county offices and other agencies from this fiscal uncertainty. I have faith in our ability to model the same collaboration and problem solving that we ask of our teachers and students and to find a workable solution. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Karen. Yvonne?
Good afternoon. My name is Ivan Carrillo. I'm a legislative advocate with the Association of California School Administrators. We represent 18,000 public school kindergarten through 12th grade administrators throughout the state, most of which are CalSTRS members. I want to begin my remarks by thanking the board and CalSTRS staff for examining charter school issues and the challenges that arise with charters. As an association, ACSA is committed to the sustainability of the fund, and I want to put that out in the forefront. So anything that arises, any policy that arises that puts the solvency at risk is of great concern to us. We are well aware that increases to the unfunded liability shifts cost burdens onto school employers as well as members of CalSTRS. But what also cannot be overlooked in this discussion, and Superintendent Monroe emphasized this multiple times, is that increases to employer rates impacts student programs and offerings and ultimately the quality of education that they receive. This is the primary reason that we're concerned with the outcome of the charter termination in Alameda County. $53,000 may not seem like a whole lot of money in the grand scheme of things, but it's ACSA's belief that $1 being removed from serving students is significant. ACSA is also concerned with the precedent that has been set with how this termination was handled. As we dig into the issue, it's been increasingly clear to us that there's a number of unanswered questions, and we look forward to continuing to work with you all on identifying answers to these as well as any potential solution. And we want to make sure that our county offices of education are protected with the resolution and the students in which they serve. So yeah, we have our commitment, you have ACSA's commitment to working with you and working with staff to do just that. And thank you for your time and attention to this matter. Appreciate it.
All right, any other speakers?
Hi there. My name is Ramel Antoine, and I am with the California Charter Schools Association. Normally, I only have 1 minute when I'm at the state board or ACCS, so 3 minutes.
All right, I'm glad we're giving you 3 then.
It's a luxury. I can slow down just a little bit. So CCSA, the California Charter Schools Association, is the professional membership organization serving California's 1,230 charter schools, and is attended by nearly 600,000 students across the state. California's charter schools are autonomous schools of choice that have been granted flexibility to demonstrate innovation in important aspects of school operations, like the administration of teacher retirement plans. The quality, secure, and portable teacher retirement plans are the key to recruiting and retaining teachers while also managing limited financial assets. We've appreciated the opportunity to meet with your staff, and we've hoped that has helped facilitate a greater understanding of how charters are authorized and operate. And over the last 6 months, we've wanted to share additional information with you today to help inform your general inquiry about charter school participation trends within STRS. I know that's where the conversation started. So your observation that approximately 11% of charters have opted out of STRS seems to also bear out in a study that was released this week by Education Next, which found that 87% of charters in California between 2014 to 2016 participated in the state's pension plan, with newer schools much less likely to participate in the state plan. What the study also found was that the share of new charter schools opting into the state plan hovered around 90% until 2013, which coincides with the tail end of the Great Recession and an increase in employer contributions from 8.25 to 19.1 by payroll by 2020. And among the surveyed schools that we've asked, and in the study found that for charter schools that opted out, the factors they reported as important were lower costs, flexibility of investment options for teachers, portability of benefits, and greater control over total compensation costs. Shorter vesting periods offered through alternative saving plans was also a driving factor for these for these schools opting out. We look forward to continuing the ongoing dialogue with your board and staff, and encourage you to reach out to us for any additional assistance. We're here to be partners through this process. Thank you.
Could you name the entity that did the study again, please? Education what?
Education Next.
Next?
Yep.
Thank
and I'm
you.
more than happy to send that along to your team
If you
as
could
well.
send it off to staff, that would be great.
Absolutely.
We already have it? Okay, we're good as long as we have it. Thank you. All right, any other speakers? All righty, moving right along. We're at 3:30. Danielle, you in the room?
Yep.
Cal RTA here? I know you remember, I think you're president, aren't you? Is Angelique here? Do we want to do this now? Are you ready? Come on up.
Should I speak from here first? Anyone who's a CalRTA member, please join me and stand behind me. There you go. Greetings to all of you and cheers to the board. Your work is endless and appreciated, so thank you very much. My name, Irene Wetzel, in case I haven't mentioned it, as president, wants you to know our association is representative and members are both from all CalSTRS, whether they're administrator or a teacher, we're here to serve. And we support retirement security. That's our main mission. So we advocate. We go see legislatures, we go everywhere to help CalSTRS keep on the roll. So thank you. But we also are people who do other things. We're retired. We enjoy doing things together, healthy walking, you name it, we do it. But our mission is to never stop caring. You may know that teachers are out there volunteering as retirees, not only in the classroom, you go in the hospital, they may be at the front desk. You go anywhere and you will see a volunteer who is a retired teacher. So as you know, retired teachers who volunteer don't get any money, but we are actually blessed that the value of our hours isn't a dollar sign. So here we'd like to represent for all the California retirees over $55,000. 55 million? I can't count so high. And so that's our total efforts for 1 year. So we want to present this to the board as our effort in community service.
So this is an opportunity for some pictures taken. So the board will be on break till 4:45. Quarter to 4. Woo! Sorry, guys. 3:45. Say 6 minutes.